The emergency lights flashed red across the massive council chamber, casting ominous shadows on the faces of the galaxy's most powerful species. Tom Anderson sat quietly in his corner seat, watching the chaos unfold before him. As Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, he had learned that sometimes the best strategy was to observe before acting. The council chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, with its high crystal dome, showing the swirling colors of deep space. But today, nobody cared about the view. The quantum anomaly that had appeared near the Centauri cluster was all anyone could think about. High Commander Grax, a tall creature with metallic scales and sharp ridges along his head, slammed his fist on the central podium. "This threat must be met with force," he roared. His species, the Crawl, were known throughout the galaxy as fearless warriors. "We cannot allow this anomaly to grow stronger." "And how exactly do you plan to fight something we don't understand?" asked Ambassador Pell, her four eyes blinking in sequence. Her thin, blue-skinned form seemed to float above her seat. The Vareen were ancient allies of Earth, known for their wisdom. Tom watched as more council members joined the argument. The Drax, with their massive battle-hardened bodies, demanded immediate military action. The mourned proud conquerors of 1,000 worlds insisted on sending their finest warships. Yet none had actually approached the anomaly yet. "Our latest scans show the anomaly has doubled in size," announced First Speaker Rin, her holographic form flickering above the center of the chamber. "3 more star systems are now within its range of influence. We must act quickly." Tom noticed something interesting. For all their boasting about courage and strength, none of the warrior races had volunteered to investigate up close. They talked about attacks and battles, but nobody wanted to be the first to approach the unknown phenomenon. He pressed the button on his desk, and a small light indicated his request to speak. The chamber fell silent. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, and many considered them a primitive, cautious species. "Earth is willing to send a research vessel," Tom said simply. "The cautious endeavor is equipped with the latest scanning technology and protective systems. Captain Wells and her crew are trained for first contact situations and anomaly research." Laughter erupted from several council members. Commander Grax's scales rattled with amusement. "Typical human response. While we speak of battle and glory, you suggest research." He spat the last word like it was poison. Tom remained calm. "Yes, because you can't fight an enemy you don't understand. Our ships may not be the biggest or most powerful, but they're safe. We plan for things to go wrong because, in space, they usually do." "Cowards," shouted a Drax representative. "You humans always hide behind your safety protocols and careful planning. The galaxy needs warriors, not scientists." The first speaker raised her hand for silence. "The human proposal is noted. Do any other species wish to volunteer for immediate intervention?" The chamber grew quiet again. Despite all their talk of battle and bravery, no one stepped forward. The warrior races looked at each other uncomfortably. "Then we accept Earth's offer," the first speaker declared. "Captain Wells will lead the investigation, but she must provide constant updates to the Council." As the meeting ended, Ambassador Pell approached Tom. "They mock human caution," she said softly, "but I notice none of them volunteered their own ships." Tom nodded, already sending the mission details to Captain Wells. "There's an old saying on Earth, the brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." As he looked out at the stars through the crystal dome, Tom knew that somewhere out there, Captain Mary Wells and her crew were preparing for their mission. They would face the unknown not with reckless courage, but with careful planning and proper precautions. Some might call it cowardice, but Tom knew better. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is admit you're afraid and move forward anyway. Captain Mary Wells stood at the bridge of the cautious Endeavor, watching her crew run through their pre-mission checks for the 3rd time. The ship's name, painted in bold letters across its white hull, had earned them mockery from the warrior races. But Mary knew that in space, Double-checking could mean the difference between life and death. "All systems are green, Captain," reported Jack Miller from his station. The young officer's fingers moved steadily across his control panel, monitoring the ship's defensive shields. "Engineering confirms our safety protocols are active." The cautious Endeavour wasn't the biggest ship in the galaxy or the most heavily armed. Instead, it carried the best sensors, the strongest shields, and more backup systems than any other vessel its size. The warrior races called it overdoing it. Humans called it common sense. "Begin approach vector," Mary ordered. "Slow and steady. Let's see what we're dealing with before we get too close." Through the main viewport, the quantum anomaly glowed with an eerie purple light. It looked like a tear in space itself, its edges shifting and moving in ways that hurt the eyes to watch. The massive phenomenon had already swallowed 3 uninhabited star systems. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Krall battle fleet," announced Communications Officer Robert Green. "They're laughing at us." Mary smiled slightly. "Put them on screen." High Commander Grax's scaled face appeared, his sharp teeth showing in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Humans, still creeping forward like scared prey. Our warriors watch and laugh at your cowardice." "Better cautious than dead, Commander," Mary replied calmly. "Our sensors are already gathering valuable data. Would you like us to share it with your fleet?" "Data? We need action. Battle. Glory." Grax roared. "Watch how true warriors handle this situation." Before Mary could respond, 3 Krall warships shot past the cautious Endeavour, their engines blazing as they charged straight toward the anomaly. Mary's crew watched in horror as the ships approached the phenomenon at full speed. "Their shields won't hold against those energy readings," Jack reported quickly. "They're not even trying to." The leading Krall ship hit some kind of invisible barrier. Its shields flared brilliant blue for a moment, then collapsed. The ship's hull crumpled like paper as unknown forces crushed it. The other 2 ships tried to turn away, but they were caught in some kind of gravitational effect. "Emergency rescue protocols," Mary shouted. "Target their crew pods with our tractor beams." The cautious Endeavour's crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had drilled for rescue operations countless times, another practice the warrior races had mocked. Now those drills paid off as they managed to grab most of the escape pods from the doomed Krall ships. 43 survivors secured, Robert reported. "Medical bay is ready to receive them." Mary watched as the remaining pieces of the Krall ships disappeared into the anomaly. "Send all our sensor data to the Council," she ordered, "and prepare the probe drones. We'll map this phenomenon properly before we get any closer." Hours later, the rescued Krall warriors stood uncomfortably in the ship's conference room. Commander Grax, his scales now dulled with dust and defeat, faced Captain Wells. "Your caution. Save my warriors," he said, clearly struggling with the words. "Perhaps there is something to be said for your human ways." Mary didn't gloat. "Every species has its strengths, Commander. We humans learned our caution the hard way, through countless disasters and mistakes. Now, would you like to see what our sensors discovered about the anomaly? Your warriors' sacrifice wasn't in vain. Their attempt taught us a lot about the phenomenon's defensive reactions." As she showed the Krall commander the detailed scans and data, Mary noticed a change in his attitude. He asked questions, considered the information carefully, and even suggested some insights based on what his warriors had experienced. "Send everything to the Council," Mary ordered once the briefing was done, "and prepare the next set of probes. Something this powerful and this precisely structured. This isn't a natural phenomenon. Someone or something made this, and we need to figure out why." The cautious Endeavour continued its careful approach, gathering data with each small step forward. The warrior races might call it cowardice, but as they'd just learned, sometimes the cautious path was the only one that kept you alive long enough to solve the mystery. James Reed stared at his screen until his eyes hurt. As the cautious Endeavour's lead science officer, He had been studying the quantum anomalies' energy patterns for the past 12 hours. Something about them seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite figure out what. More readings coming in from Probe 7, called out his assistant, Bill Parker. The pattern is repeating again. The bridge crew watched as colorful waves of data flowed across their screens. After the rescue of the Crawl warriors, the Council had given the human ship full authority to investigate. No other species had volunteered to get closer to the phenomenon that had destroyed 3 warships. "Captain," James said suddenly, sitting up straight, "I need you to look at this." Captain Wells moved to his station, watching as he pulled up 2 different data streams side by side. "What am I looking at, James?" The left screen shows the anomaly's energy pulses. The right shows standard computer binary code. He pointed to the patterns. "They're almost identical. This isn't just some strange space phenomenon. It's sending data." The bridge fell silent. Mary leaned closer to the screen. "Are you saying this thing is artificial?" "Not just artificial," James replied, his voice excited. "It's a computer, a quantum computer bigger than any solar system. And I think it's trying to talk to us." The news spread quickly through the ship. Even the remaining Crawl warriors, who had stayed aboard to observe the human investigation, came to see the evidence. Commander Grax stood at the back of the bridge, his scaled face unreadable. "If your scientists are right," he said slowly, "then our attack could have destroyed something of great importance." "Good thing we were too cowardly to blow it up then, isn't it?" Mary said with a small smile. The Crawl commander actually laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. James and his team worked nonstop to understand the signals. They launched specialized communication probes, designed to send back simple binary responses. Hour after hour, they watched and waited. "Captain," Bill's voice was loud with excitement, "we're getting a response." Everyone watched as new patterns appeared on the main screen. James's fingers flew over his keyboard, translating as fast as he could. "It's old," he said, reading the data. "Really old. This structure was built by a species that lived in our galaxy millions of years ago. They called themselves, well, the closest translation would be the Watchers." More data streamed in as the ancient computer responded to their signals. James continued translating, his eyes growing wider with each new revelation. "They built this as some kind of monitoring station," he explained. "It was meant to watch for something they were afraid would come back." "Back from where?" Mary asked. But before James could answer, all the ship's alarms began to sound at once. "Energy spike," Jack called from his station. "The anomaly is changing." The massive purple tear in space began to pulse with new colors. Waves of green and blue light rippled across its surface. The cautious Endeavour sensors recorded everything, while maintaining a safe distance. "More data coming in," James reported. This is incredible. The structure isn't just a computer, it's a warning system. The Watchers built it to alert the galaxy when..." He stopped, checking his translation again. "When what?" Commander Grax demanded. "When they detected visitors from another universe," James finished. "The energy patterns we're seeing. They're not random. They're not attacking. They're a warning message, trying to tell us something is coming through from somewhere else, somewhere outside our universe." Captain Wells looked at the swirling colors of the quantum structure, now understanding why the ancient builders had made it so large and powerful. "Send everything to the Council," she ordered, "and prepare all sensors. If something is coming through from another universe, we need to be ready." The cautious Endeavour held its position, its human crew doing what they did best, watching, waiting, and preparing for all possibilities. The warrior races had wanted to destroy this structure. Human caution had revealed its true purpose. Now they just had to figure out what kind of visitors the Watchers had been so worried about, and why they had built such an enormous machine to warn future civilizations about their return. A fleet of warships filled the space around the quantum structure. After the cautious Endeavor's discovery that it was an ancient warning system, the warrior races had decided they couldn't let humans have all the glory. The Drax, the Morn, and even more crawl ships had arrived, each determined to prove their bravery. "They're not listening to us," Jack said, watching another warship move closer to the structure. Captain Wells stood at her command station, shaking her head slowly. "All ships, this is Captain Wells," she broadcast again. "Our data shows the energy fields are becoming unstable. Please maintain a safe distance of at least." A Drax commander cut into the transmission. "Enough human cowardice. We are warriors. We do not fear this ancient machine." On the main screen, the crew watched as 3 Drax warships moved into attack formation. Their weapons charge, green energy gathering at their gunports. Behind them, Morn ships also moved forward, their captains unwilling to let the Drax claim victory alone. Commander Grax, still aboard the cautious Endeavor, growled in frustration. His time with the humans had taught him the value of their careful approach. "Those fools. They think they can shoot their way through anything." "All hands, brace for shockwaves," Mary ordered. She had seen enough warrior races in action to know what was coming. "Raise shields to maximum. Prepare emergency rescue protocols." The Drax ships fired first. Their energy weapons struck the quantum structure's outer field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to bend. Multiple distortions forming. James called from his science station. "The structure is redirecting their weapon energy, multiplying it." Brilliant beams of light shot out from the ancient machine, slicing through the Drax ships like they were made of paper. The Morn fleet tried to retreat, but they were too close. Energy pulses caught their engines, sending them spinning out of control. "Reading 37 escape pods," Bill reported. "Another 15 ships in distress." "Begin rescue operations," Mary ordered calmly. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency, extending their shields to protect the closest damaged ships, while tractor beams grabbed escape pods. The quantum structure pulsed with new colors, its surface rippling like angry waves. James worked frantically at his station, reading the new data streams. "Captain, the structure is adapting," he shouted. "Each attack is making it stronger. It's using the energy from their weapons to power up some kind of activation sequence." More warships moved forward, their commanders refusing to accept defeat. The Morn flagship, biggest of them all, charged its main cannon. "Don't." Commander Grax shouted over the communication channel. "The humans are right. Can't you see your attacks are only making it worse?" But the Morn ship fired anyway. A massive beam of destructive energy shot toward the quantum structure. This time, the ancient machine didn't just deflect the attack. It absorbed it completely. "Energy readings off the scale," James reported. "The structure is channeling the power into its core systems." The massive quantum computer began to glow brighter than any star. Waves of purple and blue energy rippled out from its center. The warrior ships that hadn't been destroyed finally began to retreat, their captains realizing too late that force wasn't the answer. 17 more escape pods detected, Jack called out. "Our rescue bays are almost full, Captain." Mary looked at the battlefield around them. Dozens of mighty warships floated dead in space, their hulls torn open by their own redirected weapons. The cautious Endeavor moved carefully between them, picking up survivors. "The structure's power levels are still rising," James reported quietly. "All that weapon energy. They gave it exactly what it needed. It's fully powering up now, and we can't stop it." Commander Grax stood on the bridge, watching as his fellow warriors were rescued by the very humans they had mocked as cowards. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "there are times when caution is the greater form of courage." The quantum structure continued to pulse with growing power, its ancient systems coming fully alive for the first time in millions of years. The warrior races had wanted to prove their bravery. Instead, they had done exactly what the Watchers had built their machine to prevent. They had given it the power to open a door between universes. Dr. Lisa Cooper had been studying alien psychology for 15 years, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. The medical bay of the Cautious Endeavor was filled with warriors from different species, all of them rescued from their destroyed ships. And all of them were asking the same question. How had the humans known? "Doctor," called a nurse, "the Morn captain is awake." Lisa walked to the bed where the massive warrior lay, his proud features now marked with burns and cuts. His first words surprised her. "You humans," he said weakly. "You knew not to attack." "How?" Lisa sat down beside his bed, her mind racing. Years of research suddenly clicked into place as she watched the injured warriors around her. She pressed the intercom button on the wall. "Captain Wells, I need you in medical bay. I think I understand something important." Mary arrived quickly, Commander Grax following close behind. The crawl warrior had barely left the bridge since his own rescue, watching and learning from the humans he had once mocked. "What have you found?" Mary asked. Lisa looked around the medical bay, gathering her thoughts. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," she said. "Everyone calls humans cowards because we're careful, because we check things twice, because we plan for disaster. But that's not cowardice. It's wisdom born from fear." "Explain," Grax demanded, his scaled head tilted with interest. "Look at the warrior races," Lisa continued. "You're all stronger than humans, faster. Your ships have better weapons. Your bodies can survive things that would kill us instantly. But that's exactly why you don't understand real fear or how to use it." She walked to a display screen, pulling up human medical data. "Humans are soft, fragile. We break easily. So we evolved to be afraid, to see danger everywhere. And that fear taught us to think, to plan, to solve problems instead of just fighting them. But fear is weakness," one of the Drax warriors called from his bed. "No," Lisa said firmly. "Fear is a tool. It's what makes us stop and think, what's the worst that could happen? And then we plan for that worst case. That's not cowardice, it's survival." Mary nodded slowly. "Like the Watchers who built this structure," she said. "They feared something enough to build a warning system this massive. They didn't try to fight whatever was coming. They tried to warn others about it." "Exactly." Lisa turned to the injured warriors. "What do your stories say about the Watchers? Most ancient races were like you. Warriors, conquerors. But the Watchers were different, weren't they?" Commander Grax's eyes widened. "The old tales. They say the Watchers were careful, cautious. They built great machines instead of weapons. They studied the stars, and—" his voice trailed off as he realized what she meant. "They were like humans," Lisa finished. "They understood fear, and now their warning system is fully powered up, trying to tell us something they were afraid of." As if responding to her words, the ship's alarms began to sound. James's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, to the bridge. The quantum structure, it's starting to transmit." They rushed to the bridge, leaving the injured warriors to think about what they'd learned. On the main screen, waves of data poured from the ancient machine. "It's a message," James reported, his fingers flying over his controls. "The Watchers, they found gaps between universes, places where the walls between realities were thin. They built these structures to monitor those gaps because something had come through before, something that nearly destroyed them." "And now?" Mary asked quietly. "Now the quantum structure is fully powered up, thanks to all those weapon discharges. And it's detecting movement in those gaps. Something is coming through again." Lisa looked at the massive structure, pulsing with stolen energy. "The Watchers were afraid," she said softly. "Afraid enough to build this. Maybe it's time we all learn to be a little more afraid. And a little more careful." The ancient machine's warnings continued to flash across their screens as the gaps between universes grew wider. The warrior races had wanted to destroy it. Human caution had preserved it. Now they just had to hope that same caution would help them face whatever was about to come through. The bridge of the cautious Endeavor was silent as they watched the space between universes tear open. The quantum structure pulsed with blinding light, its ancient systems marking the spot where reality itself was starting to break. Multiple objects emerging. James called from his science station. Size readings suggest ships, hundreds of them. Through the gap came vessels of strange design, their hulls shimmering with unfamiliar energy. The warrior race ships that remained after the earlier disaster raised their weapons, ready to fight. "Wait," Captain Mary Wells broadcast to all ships. "Let's not make the same mistake twice. James, what are you reading from those ships?" James studied his screens carefully. "Their power readings are massive, but, Captain, I'm detecting life signs. Millions of them. And their ships. They're not warships. They're city ships. Transport vessels. Incoming transmission," Robert announced. "They're trying to communicate." The main screen flickered to life, showing a being that looked almost like living crystal. Its voice came through the translator, tired and hopeful at the same time. "We mean no harm," it said. "We are refugees. Our universe is dying. We seek sanctuary." Commander Grax, still on the bridge, stepped forward. "It could be a trick," he growled. "We should attack now, while we have the chance." "No," Mary said firmly. "That's exactly what we've learned not to do." She turned to the screen. "I am Captain Wells of the human vessel Cautious Endeavor. Can you explain your situation?" The crystal being's light pulsed softly. "Our universe is collapsing. We spent thousands of years searching for a way out. The only paths we found led here, but they were guarded by great machines that destroyed any ship trying to force its way through. The Watcher's other warning systems," James whispered. "They must have built them at every thin spot between universes. We studied the machines," the being continued. "We realized they weren't meant to keep us out. They were meant to make us stop and think, to approach with caution and understanding, not with violence." Mary looked at Commander Grax, then at the refugee fleet. "Just like humans learned to do," she said softly. The warrior commander nodded slowly. "And just as the Watchers themselves must have done long ago." He stepped forward. Perhaps they built these machines not to warn us of invaders, but to test us, to see if we were wise enough to inherit their legacy." Mary turned back to the screen. "Your people," she asked, "they're like the Watchers, aren't they? Scientists, builders, careful planners." "Yes," the crystal being replied. "We could have tried to force our way through, but we knew that would only bring destruction. So we studied. We learned. We approached carefully. And when the machine detected our nature, it opened the way." James's console beeped. "Captain, the quantum structure is transmitting again. It's a message from the Watchers themselves. They say this was all a test. The refugee fleet found the right way through because they were careful, just like the Watchers were, just like humans are." The crystal being's light brightened. "We ask sanctuary in your universe. We bring knowledge, technology, the wisdom of an entire universe. Will you help us?" Mary looked around her bridge. At James, carefully analyzing every piece of data. At Lisa, understanding the psychology of two universes. At Commander Grax, who had learned that caution wasn't cowardice. "We will help," she said firmly. "And I think I know why the Watchers built these machines. Not to guard against invasion, but to make sure that only those who approached with wisdom could pass through. Because wisdom is what builds civilizations. Wisdom is what helps us survive." The quantum structure's light began to fade as the refugee fleet moved fully into their universe. Behind them, the gap between realities sealed itself, the ancient machine's work finally complete. "The Council will need to prepare for many new refugees," Commander Grax said. "It will require careful planning, cautious integration." "Sounds like a job for us cowardly humans," Mary smiled. "After all, being careful got us this far." As the cautious Endeavor led the refugee fleet toward Council space, Mary thought about how far they'd come. The warrior races had learned that courage wasn't just about fighting. The refugees had found their sanctuary, and humanity had proved that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in being fearless, but in being wise enough to understand your fears. The Watchers would have been proud.